Hey everybody, welcome back to the Omega Games podcast. I am John, your host, and I am excited to be here today with Ann Schnabel. She is a UX engineer in the Web3 space. And thank you so much for being on board today.
Thanks for having me. Very excited.
Oh, we're going to have a great conversation today, especially as Web3 relates to the developer community and kind of what are some of the basics of Web3. But before we do that, remember to subscribe to our videos, like our channel, and share them with your friends because this is such a cool space and we want to share this with everybody. So Ann, in terms of Web3, what would you say are some of the basics that maybe a developer or someone who really doesn't understand what we're talking about when we say that word Web3, what are some of the basic things they might need to understand in terms of how they can begin to get into this emerging technology?
Yeah, so a lot of non-developers specifically are very intimidated by Web3. Either they think it's silly, they don't know what it is, they think it's scary perhaps. But ultimately, Web3 comes down to a couple of things, and I'll talk about those here. But one of them is ownership. So Web3 allows you to own things online as you would in real life. And that's a new concept. So
That's
you
fascinating.
look like you had.
That's fascinating. So when you're talking about ownership, and obviously as a developer, you're always in kind of a creative space, but a lot of times a company, may have control of that code, or you may be working for someone else. How does that idea of ownership change, I guess, say even for brands or artists or for developers who want to be able to create something that truly is unique to their expression? Is that something that Web3 and these kind of Web3 concepts can begin to change the focus for creators?
Definitely. A big thing about Web3 is that content creators own their own content. So when you think about Facebook, you think about Twitter, everything I put on Twitter is owned by Twitter. I don't own that. Whereas on Web3, if a creator makes content, they own that content. They own that post. They can even sell that post if they want. It provides a new way for brands and artists to interact with their users and their followers in a way that hasn't existed so far. So, for instance, if I sell an NFT or a token, perhaps, to my followers, they can buy that, and I can then give them specific opportunities that other people don't have because they don't have that token or that permission. It's kind of a gatekeeping mechanism.
Yeah, it's interesting that you're chatting about kind of this gatekeeper aspect. I find this really fascinating in a lot of ways. There's always been a third party associated with the delivery of, let's say, content media and content media creation. So your big, record labels. If an artist wanted to get, famous, they would go create their music, they bring it to a record label, and then the record label would go ahead and work on that distribution. One of the big things that I love about the Web3 space, and when we talk about that for the audience, that can be really any new emerging technology that creates what we would consider a peer-to-peer relationship or interaction. So people have heard of, NFTs, they've heard of blockchains. All of this is really about creating a more secure and more direct connection between you and the individual who wants to consume either a piece of media or, like you said, a creative aspect or some sort of conversation with you directly as a person, and ultimately remove that middleman. So I think that does provide a real fascinating new frontier for the developer community in the sense of, well, now it's not large companies that necessarily would be behind, let's say, creation of a widget or an app, but this allows people to really get involved in that and say, hey, I've done something really, really cool. Do you want to actually work with me directly to buy this? Or even in additional sphere of creating things that are open source, where we can do a lot of good with this creation in ways that maybe we weren't able to before.
Yeah, I agree. And something that's interesting with that is that there exists in Web3 the capability for creating content that can then be dispersed through multiple methods. So if I'm a developer, I can make my own version of Twitter and pull from this database of, or this ledger of posts and put it on my Twitter, or someone else can have a competing Twitter, and then users can decide which is the better Twitter and use it themselves.
It's fascinating. It's really like almost a drive to finding I guess, a truth, or really even what the customer more desires or more wants in a more effective way. I think one of
Definitely.
the big things that I see about Web3 and these new technologies that are emerging is a drive towards customer experience and understanding customer behavior and behavior analytics in a way that we haven't been able to before. So think about, no third party reliance, right? How does that removal, like we said, of that middleman make a more direct connection between the consumer and the producer in a way that we haven't had before?
Well, that's interesting that you say that. There's When artists create ways to interact with their users and their followers through Web3, they are inviting their followers into a community
Mm,
of followers. And those followers can have say over what they write their next song over. They have a direct link to the artist in a way that they haven't before, where they can suggest things,
mm.
and they can ask for specific merchandise and the artist can create that for them. It's all about user experience. The user really has a lot of power in this situation that maybe they haven't had before in asking for things that they need.
That's really fascinating, and I think when we're speaking about this for the audience to understand the technologies that are emerging, like, cryptocurrencies, or, people have probably heard of Bitcoin or Ethereum. There are a lot of technologies that are being built on top of these theoretical systems and physical hardwares that you're speaking about, that allow individuals to have very direct contact in a somewhat anonymous but very secure environment, where they can present those ideas that are important to them. And they can interact, like you said, with an artist, maybe in a way that's not in these centralized manners, or there's this guard put up. So if you do want to create a song and you want to have a certain select group of individuals that are part of your inner sphere, that are part of that creative process, collaboration is possible in ways that you were never able to do before. And I think, like you said, some of that could be through NFTs or through tokens. One of the things that I love about NFTs is that you can have, let's say, a minted set of 500 or 10,000, and those individuals that buy into having that digital ownership. And really what it is having that specific string of characters that can only be minted one time in the digital space, to say, this is a unique identifier of why I identify with this community. So think about the possibilities of creating more aligned communities, more connected relationships for individuals over preferential determination. I think is really critical and key, and something I'm very excited about and passionate about in this space as well.
Yeah, that's honestly, it's just so cool. I'm looking forward to being able to, once bigger brands get onto the Web3 space and into the Web3 space and start interacting with users in a way that they haven't before. I'm excited for like some of my brand, like being able to tell my soap company, like, hey, I would prefer like an unscented version, and then having a bunch of people be like, oh yeah, I need that too, and just
Hmm.
letting it build.
Well, that's fascinating. So what are some of the impacts that you see, especially in the creator and the developer community? What are some of the impacts that maybe are going to happen soon, and then some things that maybe brands and other big corporations may need to start taking notice of in terms of understanding that behavior of the audience?
Well, I think right now it's difficult to describe the utility of Web3
Mm,
because honestly, it's not all there yet. Um, NFTs, a lot of people think like, well, what's the point of an NFT? Other people can just take it and copy it, and they can use that image too. And ultimately, like it's art collection. It's being able to say that you own this specific art piece. But in the future, like let's say 2 years from now, there will be utilities that are built onto these NFTs that we can't even think about right now because they haven't been invented.
sure.
But the best comparison that I have heard on this is kind of like when the iPhone came out and it had geolocation on it.
Yeah.
And people were like, why would we ever need geolocation? Until Uber came out. And
Right.
then we really needed geolocation, and it was how did I ever live without this? Google
Mhm.
Maps, everything like that. So I know we're going to hit some of those moments in the next 2 years, and then we're looking at mass adoption in 5 to 10 years.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think, some of the conversations that I've had over the last, 6 months to a year, especially even with, people who work in city government and in different organizations that do have sometimes a longer track of adoption of technology. One of the things that I've been chatting about and had some really good conversations is around things like digital passports. There's proof of attendance protocols with a company called POAP out of Europe, where we could drive in-store experience by creating a reason for why individuals would go to a specific space, use that geolocated technology to collect a unique token or identifier that they were there at this time and bought this item. Well, think about huge, impacts for businesses that they could then say, wow, these are the items that fly off the shelves. These are the items that people didn't really like. Can help with brand, delivery and brand performance. In addition, this can drive in-store foot traffic, let's say for retail businesses that have certainly struggled a little bit more after the pandemic, although there's been a lot of, resurgence in shopping local, etc. Some of the conversations I've had were, hey, could we create, a downtown district where, individuals from outside the cities or outside the towns have an incentive to come downtown because they want to collect that token or that unique identifier by going in and actually scanning a QR code or being in a physical location, and we're delivering that to their smart device, where now they're also connected to other individuals who've made that same decision to be there in that place and time. Huge implications for events or for concert venues or for anyone that potentially could use technology to better understand their customers and what's important to them and why they would want to collect highly anonymous data, but it's highly specific to behavior, which I think is fascinating because there's no PII being transferred, but we know that there were this many downloads of this many people that came from this many devices in this place. And that tells us a huge amount of information about what's important to these groups in ways that we could never collect previously.
And that takes it so that those users can actually obtain value through having
Hmm.
that. So, for instance, if you go to a concert and you check in and you get your proof of attendance, and then later on, Rihanna decides, oh, all of those people who came to this conference, I'm going to put on a special conference, but only they can attend.
Exactly.
And yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I love that. And I think that, again, like you said, allows the creator to incentivize the growth of a truly, direct and excited fan base and bought in fan base. And that can be for any brand, any business, any individual that has a great idea, right? I believe, and I think, this is something when we were talking about, keeping an eye out for utility in the future. There's a lot of terms and tech and kind of technology for people to wrap their heads around. But I go back to the idea of, look, you don't have to explain how email works today to anyone, but we all use it. You don't have to explain how a smartphone works, but we all use them. And surely, I mean, if we were to open up an iPhone and look at all the pieces in there, and you as a UX engineer, there's a lot that goes into it. But we don't think about it because it's just so relevant and in front of us. I think we're on that track. So what are some key takeaways that you might be able to leave the audience with, in a sense of, if we're thinking about where Web3 is going, we want to keep an open mind to new technologies and find synergies with our current, I call it the Web 2.5 world that we're in right now. What are some key takeaways you'd love the audience to have, especially if they're a creator, a developer, or an engineer?
Yeah, so I guess some key takeaways I really would try and hit home are that Web3 is about ownership, and it allows you to own things in a way that you haven't been able to before. It takes away third party reliance, and it allows you to interact more closely and more directly with content creators, or if you're a content creator, to your consumers.
I really love that. And I think we don't fully understand right now how NFTs will have impact and change, like you said, in terms of this ownership. I mean, ultimately, I was chatting with someone a couple weeks ago, and I said, we all have an NFT in our wallet. We have a driver's license. Yeah, I mean, maybe there's people that could try to steal that, or we could duplicate one from, government agency. But that string of numbers that we have is very similar. So when you think about this idea of digital passports or a digital version of your driver's license being a non-fungible token, which is actually much more secure, much easier to deliver, and really assumes a lot more potential value and opportunity because it can be geolocated. It can actually be used, like you said, if you're at a concert and someone wants to say, "Oh, I'm only giving this unique experience to those individuals that were there in that place and time." Well, that drives an incentive for more people to come because they might be like, "Well, I don't know what's coming next, but I want to be part of this really unique community." I think if we take these kind of Web 1 or tactile examples of something that we have, like the driver's license and a wallet, we're able to then say, you know what, it might not be that far away for me to think about this being digitized and this information is used in a much more efficient manner to, like we said, enhance that user experience, enhance people's lives. Because I believe that's probably the key that you mentioned about ownership, is that Web3 will allow us to really make people's lives better in terms of, we all say it, right? Remove the middleman, but make it a much more direct experience between the creator and the consumer. And thank you so much for taking some time to chat with me today.
For sure. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No, this was a great conversation. And I think if I'm going to leave the audience with something, I would say keep your eyes out. Dive into this. Get in touch with someone like Ann. Get in touch with someone like myself. We're here and happy to answer questions. We love having conversations about Web3. Remember to subscribe to our channel and like our videos. Of course, share them. If you want to get in touch with Ann, there'll be some contact information in the comment section below. Be sure to reach out to us as well. And I look forward to seeing you all back on our next episode of the Omega Games Podcast.